G'day everyone, welcome to the Ultimate Youth Worker podcast.
Hey.
Good,
Howdy.
excellent. So on today's cast, we have 4 of my former students from different parts of my teaching career who have all been out in the field for a little while now. And why don't you all introduce yourself? Tim, kick us off.
Hi, my name's Tim. I studied Diploma of Youth Work with Aaron back in 2014. I think we graduated. I can't really remember.
About then.
Yeah, I spent a lot, I guess my working history, I spent a lot of time on the floor in residential care, looking after youth. I did that for about 5 years, but during that time I also did a few different roles within that area. But then at the same time, I was at uni. I studied my bachelor's in human services, which I went on to do my master's in social work. Got a semester left of that, and then that will be done. So currently working for YSAS, which is a youth organisation in Dandenong, directly with Victoria Police. So it's a new pilot program. So probably talk about that a bit later, but yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Tim. And just to clarify, he's working with the police. He hasn't been picked up by the police. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm covered in tattoos, so maybe, I mean, a lot of people do look at me and go, "You sure you're not meant to be in the cells?" But
Excellent. Thank you. Jesse, you've just popped up, so why don't you give us your blurb?
Also studied at Chisholm with Aaron back in 2014 or 15 as in a Diploma of Youth Work. I was volunteering with the YMCA for the whole time that I was studying, which kind of led me into work afterwards, which was really good. I became a residential youth worker straight out of TAFE. Did that for 3 years and then kind of did casual work across council and a few different youth work organisations. And now I have moved to Darwin and am working with Child Protection as a youth worker in their Child Protection team. That's where I'm at.
And you get to travel all over the top end there?
Yes, we're the remote team, so we do all of the remote communities around the top end. So
excellent.
But not down to Catherine. the top of the top end.
Yeah. Nice. Thanks, Jesse. Who shall we go? Beck.
Hello. Yes. So I studied with Aaron and did a Bachelor's of Arts with a major in youth work and a minor in counselling. I started my course in 2013 and finished halfway through 2016. And so straight after I finished uni, I got a job at a non-for-profit organisation, mostly just running programs for primary and secondary age students, doing a bit of outreach work there as well. I went travelling for a little bit, came back. I got a job at a local council in the youth and family team. And I finished up with that job about a year ago, and I just spent the last 10 months living in Canada. So, yes, I'm finally back in Melbourne. So,
excellent.
That's my story.
Thanks for that, Beck. And last but certainly not least, Matthew.
So I studied my Diploma of Youth Work 2014-15 with the boys at Chisholm. Prior to that, I'd worked in the American summer camp system, so that's what got me into youth work over here. And then from there, I moved into different local city council, so I had a whole bunch of different roles there. So program worker, cultural development, projects manager, leadership worker, generalist youth worker. I was the facilitator for Freezer down on the Mornington Peninsula. And then when I finished up at the 2 councils, I went back to Chisholm as part of the Reconnect team, which is re-engages people back into education. And then on the side, I'm also now jumped into a teaching part. So I'm also teaching the Cert 4 of youth work at Chisholm at the same time.
Excellent. Thanks for all that, everyone. So this particular cast, I want to focus on that first youth work job. One of the biggest questions we get all the time at Ultimate is how do we get that first youth work job? How do we move into that from being a student? And all five of us have very different ways that we've ended up in the field. So let's kick it off. Who wants to start?
I'll go.
Excellent. Beck?
So funnily enough, I was able to get my first youth worker job through one of Aaron's contacts, actually. And I think, the key role in me getting that job was networking, and through knowing Aaron, having the right connections. And I think that's what really got my foot in the door. And, after I had that first job, I then had a few months off before I came back to youth work. And the same principle applied. I got my second job in the field through connections I'd already made, and I made them connections through when I was at placement at uni, and just when I was in my first role, just with the professionals I meet, about making them connections. And so I found networking the best way to get kind of your foot in the door once I left uni. Yeah.
Excellent. Tim?
Yeah, look, I think I completely agree with that comment by Beck about networking. I think you really need to put yourself out there. It's getting more and more competitive when it comes to youth work, especially with the the level of education within the sector. 20 years ago, you didn't really need any qualification. Now it's, people looking at bachelor's, master's degrees as almost the bare minimum to get into case management roles. So I think you need to really put yourself out there, network, get on LinkedIn, try and put yourself out there, try and do extra things to, put yourself ahead of the curve. What I did when I was 6 months, as we've mentioned before, 6 months into my diploma, when I ended up setting a meeting up with a person that was higher up in one of the non-for-profits that did residential care, and tried to get a job with them, and that ended up happening. So I was 6 months into my diploma and working in Resi, which was a bit of an eye-opening experience. But I mean, it did give me a lot of, conflict management and direct practice skills that you really don't get anywhere else. And I think that's, when you get in your first job in youth work, I think you really need to focus on, just getting that experience. It might not be the job that you want to end up in, but I think every job in youth work or social work or community services can teach you skills that can be applied anywhere. So it's really good to just try and get as many skills as possible early on.
For sure. Matt?
Well, I did what every good student does after they finish a course, and I jumped on a plane the next day, and I went to America for 5 months. So I went back to working in the summer camp system, and then when I came back to Australia, I was really struggling to find a job because most of my experience and my resumes was from overseas, and it just didn't match with the positions that I was applying for. But I was also lucky enough, again, with networking and who that one of the managers or one of the coordinators at one of the local councils was a relation of a family friend. And I sent her an email just saying, can we meet and have a chat? Because I'm struggling to get a job, and I'd just like to get some information about what I should do or what I should be looking at. Here's a copy of my resume. And then when I went there for the meeting, she basically just said straight up, look, it's your lack of experience. That's what would be holding you back. But we've looked at your resume and we want to offer you a casual position. We can only give you a couple hours a week, but if you are committed, we might be able to, we'll be able to build up on that. So they offered me maybe 5 hours max a week, and it was a 2-hour round trip to get there. But I reckon after the first week, I was working 3-4 days a week there anyway. So once I got in, it was just about showing my commitment and passion for the field. But yeah, I wouldn't have got the job if I didn't know somebody. So that's a really big thing when you're studying, to build up those networks and get to know as many people as you can.
For sure. Thanks, Matt. And Jesse?
Yeah, well, I think the thing that really set me up was, the reason I got into youth work was because I began as a volunteer with the YMCA on their youth programs, and doing that throughout the entirety of my youth work diploma, not only, as Tim said, gives you the kind of, hands-on experience and practical knowledge that you can use in your diploma, but it also gives you a year and a half's experience for when you leave and you put it on your resume and you do start applying for jobs. So I was also working for council in St Kilda at an adventure playground too, so that gave me a little bit more experience. But yeah, having that experience is probably number one. So any volunteer gigs that you can get, probably the best thing that you can do throughout your diploma to set yourself up for a job afterwards. And then I'm not sure if I had a person who put me onto someone at Anglicare for residential care, or whether I just applied through the normal means. It was that long ago. But got a job with them and straight into resi straight after my diploma. But yeah, the fact that I was able to give real life examples during my interview and everything like that, gives me a leg up.
For sure. Thanks for that, guys. And I would say yes to all those things as well. As these lovely people can attest, I used to talk about networking all the time. Network, and it is the key to getting good work in this sector. There are a lot of crap jobs out there that anybody can get their hands on, but getting those good ones, the golden eggs, it's all about networking. So so much so, it's one of our first podcasts. Episode 7 was all about networking. So network. Start with your lecturers. Get to know people who are out there in the field. Go to your local council events. Every opportunity you get to hang out with other youth workers, spend that time there for sure.
Can I also add, Aaron?
Yeah, man.
I think it's if you get a job within like a fairly large NGO, a lot of those organizations have hundreds of employees and so many different positions within the sector. I worked for a few NGOs, and I know people that in that role have moved sideways into different positions. So I think people got to, like I was saying before, it might not be the position you want right now, but once you get your foot in the door with one of the big ones, it's quite easy to move around within that organization. I think that's the key, is trying to find that foot in the door.
Definitely. And so true, particularly in those larger organizations, they can often be siloed and you don't spend much time with other teams or other divisions of that. Spend time with them, find excuses to meet with people and have coffees and just get to know what's happening there, because if you show some initiative, a bit of oomph, that'll give you the opportunity. As Matt was saying, it's about getting that foot in the door. It's the opportunity to show that you're the right person for the job, and doing things like Jesse said, volunteering. As lecturers and teachers, we talk about this all the time from like day one. Get some volunteer work. If you're not volunteering, or you haven't got some volunteer work under your belt, get to it, because it shows some commitment to the sector, to organisations. Yes, you can get roles in things like resi care or backfill and all that type of thing, but the key is showing that initiative all the time. If you put yourself forward, if you show that you can do the job better than anyone else, you're going to get picked up. If you're lazy and you don't respond to emails and stuff like that, you're going to find it hard. So yes, you need to step up. You need to show that you're the right person for that role. Excellent. Thanks, guys. And just show of hands, who started working before they finished their qualification? 4 out of 5 of us. Key thing there, yeah. As I said to Beck and all the guys that were in my degree program, by second year of a 3-year course, if you haven't found a job yet, you're probably, starting to run late in the game. You've already done a placement by now. You've started to, really get your head around what the sector means, and finding that first foot in the door, whether it's with a not-for-profit, small group. My first youth work job was local church, and I was the youth worker 2 days a week, and it wasn't the job I expected that I'd end up in, but it was a great first foot in the door. I got to run programs and meet with the local council youth workers pretty regularly. I was really lucky in our local government area. We had a really strong youth work network, still kicking along today, the Banyule Nillumbik Youth Service Network. Really strong network. We all got together. We bounced off each other, and guess what? We bounced around the organisation. So if someone had a job coming up, we were the first ones to hear about it. If there was a program that was struggling and they needed a few extra hands, we were the first ones to be there. So getting in and understanding those opportunities is really important early as you can possibly get. Don't wait to the last minute. Don't wait to, you finish your course end of November, put the resume out there, go on holiday. 5,000 people are doing the same thing, yeah? So get in early, save yourself all that hassle. On that, what was it like getting a bit of experience post your qualification?
Post-qualification or
post-qualification? So most of us are saying we were already out there in the field as students. We're out there doing the job, and one of the great things about youth work is that it is art and science. We are learning on the job as much as anything. But what was it like? You finished your qualification. You've actually got your piece of paper now. You probably know a little bit. What was it like getting some experience post-qualification? Okay, Tim, you probably didn't know a bit, but we'll get back to that.
I still don't know what's going on. I'll start off. I think it's a really strange feeling to finish a qualification, have the piece of paper and go, okay, where do I want to go from here? Do I want to just keep doing what I'm doing? Do I want to continue my studies? And I think I gave myself about 6 months of just working before I realized that I wanted to, do extra study on top of my diploma, which led into my degree and my master's. But I think it's a really important moment for people to realize where they want to go and what direction they want to take when it comes to youth work. I know it really depends on what qualification you complete, but I think the qualification that you do really sets the groundwork on the theories and kind of some of the general knowledge around how to approach youth work. But I think that on the ground work, it's you can't put a price on it. It is where you do majority of your learning. I had my first job in Resi, and nobody taught me how to catch a mini fridge. Someone taught me, but God damn it, I wish they did.
Yeah. And if you don't think 15-year-olds can throw mini fridges, they can. Yeah.
Mate, you see some of these 15-year-olds these days, and they're big boys.
Good. Thanks for that, Tim. Jesse, what about yourself, man?
Mine was a 5-year-old throwing the mini fridge. So they're strong too. It was good. You're kind of really excited because, first job as a qualified youth worker, and you go in guns blazing, and then you learn real quick that you got to settle down a bit and just kind of learn and take it easy and don't be too over the top, and especially in a residential environment. But it was like the first 6 months is probably the hardest 6 months of my youth work career. but the part where I learned probably the most as well. So, yeah, it's something I look forward to.
Good, Matt.
In all honesty, I think for me, because I had been working with young people for 5 or so years before I started studying, then when there was a bit of a gap between when I finished and I got a job in the field, my biggest concern was if I was still going to have the skills to jump in. But what I did realize very early on and was that my ability to work with young people was still there. It made me just kind of confident in the decision that I'd made to jump into this field. And then I think for me, the biggest struggle I had was the working around politics of organizations. But I kind of learned how to maneuver myself around that to be able to learn as much as I could about the different skills and the different techniques that I was lacking or I wasn't confident on, when we were studying, because you can sit there and look at a piece of paper or you can look at a video or, a case study, but you don't really know what you're going to do until you face it. And just getting that experience, that was probably the biggest part. And realizing that how I handled those situations were correct and I had the ability to do it. That was, I had big self-doubt on my skills, especially not having a job after such a long time. And even studying, I always thought that I could do better. But to actually, get those responses, especially from the young people I worked at, it was just more of a confidence building thing there.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that. And Beck.
Yeah, my first 6 months was, it was a big learning curve for sure. I think in my placements that I'd done throughout my uni course, they were at a local high school and just a local organisation where it was more one-on-one work with young people, and with the high school, it was more focused on counselling sessions and whatnot. So in my first job, it was a lot of facilitation of programs and developing programs and leading them and running drop-in centres. And so it was a bit of a different experience compared to what I'd done in placement. So yeah, lots of learning. And I think too, I don't know, I guess I kind of thought, youth work, you're like, I'm going to work with young people. 12 to 25 is what the adolescent thing is. And then, youth work is not just about your age criteria, but it's also about, you're working with young people's families. And then I ended up working with primary school students. So learning all their developmental stages, how to interact with them appropriately. And it end off in that job later on, developing and running a playgroup as well. So my first year out of youth work, I was working with all ages and doing a variety of different roles. So it was a really good learning experience for sure. And I'm super grateful, for all that experience that I got in my first year out of uni. So
Awesome. Thanks, Beck. It was exactly the same for me. I was already working in the field when I started studying, and by the time I was finishing my youth work degree in 2008, I was an assistant manager of a drug and alcohol rehab for 18 to 30-year-olds. And so I was already doing it, but there was a bit of that chest puff up of, woohoo, I've got a piece of paper now that I can hang my hat on and say, I know what I'm talking about. And that lasted for, 6 or 7 minutes until one of the young people told me to fuck off. And I was like, okay, so nothing's changed, even though I got a bit of paper. And that first 6 months for me, post having that piece of paper, it provided some opportunities that I hadn't had because I didn't have a piece of paper before then. But it really didn't provide a lot of extra kudos to me. And as you've all said, it was learning on the ground. How do I keep doing the stuff that I already know, the theory? How do I bring theory into practice? How do I do this every day? How do I deal with young people? Even though I've been dealing with young people by that stage for 6 years, how do I keep doing it every day, day in, day out? youth work's not sexy. It's just a grind sometimes. And, as I've said a number of times, I can count mountaintop experiences on my hands, where it's been, woo, I've done amazing stuff in youth work over 20 years. And it's that hard slog every day that is important. And, as Matt said, understanding the politics of the field and within your organisations and, even within your team, what you can and can't say and who does what and who's a morning person, who's an afternoon person.
You'll never learn quicker how to be able to suck up people, but do it in a way where you're not demeaning yourself.
Yeah.
Getting to know those different quirks and what's going to best fit. I never really had many issues with any of the people I worked with, and you'd see the way they do things, I'm not a fan of that, or the way this person does that. And I just kind of looked at it and went, I just kind of want to see how everyone does it.
Yep.
And then also, Aaron, coming out of a qualification, you're so optimistic about, making a difference. And I think everyone here could say that, you start youth work because you're like, I just can't imagine myself, putting in PowerPoints for the rest of my life. No. Yeah. Not having to go electricians. I thought about it at one point, but you know what I mean? Like you want a job which makes you feel like you're making a difference. I think the reality of youth work in the sector is sometimes you won't feel like you're doing that, and you're going to hit barriers, and you're going to realize that kind of neoliberalistic kind of management style that's just bombarded from the bottom, from the top
KPIs
to the bottom.
and
restricts you so much, and you're the face of it to these young people that potentially be traumatized, and you might see the repercussions of that. So I think it's being comfortable knowing that you're part of a system that isn't always perfect, that's trying its best and it's always adapting is probably the biggest adjustment that I think a lot of youth workers need to make when they get into the sector. Yeah,
for sure. And I just want to touch on the point that Beck made. A lot of youth work actually has nothing to do with young people. It's their siblings and it's their parents and it's working with teachers. And how much of your work at the moment do you reckon is outside of that 12 to 25 bracket?
You're talking to everyone?
Yeah, everyone. Yeah.
My pilot program is 12 to 24-year-olds, so pretty goddamn close. But
how much of your program is directly with young people versus with everything else?
Look, it's because my job does rely on working with Victoria Police. I do have a lot of dealings with police and a lot of the statutory bodies of child protection, youth justice and stuff like that. So, and at the same time, a lot of families, we do a lot of family work as well. So I guess, it is a bit of a mix. I think the comment's true in the sense that you get into youth work thinking that you're always just going to be working with, children or youth. And then, you might end up be doing family work and it's mostly, you're trying to help the parents manage the young people. So,
for sure.
In my last job at council, for example, you'd work a 40-hour week and say I did 3 after-school programs. Each program will go for 2 hours. So I'd be spending, out of the 40 hours, 6 hours a week with young people. So it just shows you how much work goes into the background of, developing these programs, but also, just so much behind-the-scenes work. And you don't know that when you're studying. You're a bit naive and just think you're going to always be with young people. When you work out 6 hours a week with young people compared out of the 40 hours, it's not very much, is it?
Yeah.
Depending on what job you get into, I know, spending a lot of time working in resi before my current position, you do a lot of, direct practice of young people. There is a certain level of paperwork and expectations behind that. But I would say majority of youth work positions have a lot of paperwork, a lot of case notes, a lot of writing, a lot of documenting things. So if you're not really comfortable with that kind of work, you need to prepare yourself for that, because it's not, just going down to the park and playing a bit of ball with little Johnny. It's a lot of it is just paperwork, and it's the reality of the sector.
Last stat I saw was about 60% of our time is doing paperwork or stuff that has nothing to do with actually working with people.
Yep.
Matt?
Yeah, well, I suppose a standard day for me, I'll try and see at least 3 young people a day, 2 or 3, and I'll only see each of them for an hour. So a maximum out of an 8-hour day will be 3 hours with a young person, and then the other 5 hours is paperwork and travel.
Yeah.
But then that's if I see a young person, if I manage to get onto them. So there could be whole days where there's no interactions, or there could be a day where you've spent the whole 8 hours with them because you're in a crisis situation.
Yeah.
So
or 8 hours trying to chase them.
Yeah. There's lots of chasing.
I mean, I look at my current position, and I provide brief intervention for people. I do assessments, and then I triage to different organisations based on their needs. Most of my work is paperwork and doing referrals and triaging with different organisations. That is pretty much my job. I would say maybe at most 20% is actually interacting with young people face to face. Even probably less, to be honest.
Yep.
For me, well, the program I'm currently working for is 17 to 65-year-olds. But, we do get a lot in between that 17 to 25 that want to re-engage back into education. And in all honesty, when we get a new client, the first probably 2 or 3 weeks is a lot of touching base, whether it's meeting in person or making phone calls. But once we kind of get them enrolled into education, or we've, referred to other services that are able to assist, we're only kind of making contact once a month with those clients. And it could just be a text message, how's everything going? And you don't even get a reply. So a lot of my job is actually networking between different departments within the school that I work for, different community services, so they know that we're available if their clients are ready for education. If I do get somebody that is like 17 or just about to turn 17, a lot of the time it's actually speaking to the parents. Because they seem to be the ones that know what their child wants to do. So communicating with them what we do and how we can help. And, you go to do a registration form with the young person and they write their parents' phone number down, or, their parents' email address. So they're the only form of contact you have in those meeting things. Whereas when I was with council, same as well, you'd work with young people maybe 3 times a week, and it would be for 2 hours or so. And then it was about, again, networking, paperwork, internal departments. So just building those different networks around you to try and make it smoother.
Whereas in Resi Care, you've probably got the complete opposite split. That it's like 80% with the kids, 20% doing paperwork.
Yep.
Or if 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Excellent. Well, coming to the end, guys, of today's session, and I just want you to have a think for a second. And what's one tip that you would give to those new youth workers, those who are either coming close to finishing their courses or they're moving into the sector? What's that one tip to help them move into the sector well?
Well, I go and speak to a few youth work classes, even prior to starting to teach them, to speak to them. And that's a question that they always ask, what's one thing that you can tell me? And I think what I'll always say to them is you can't save everybody.
Yep.
And a lot of people enter the community services field in general with that mentality. And you see the kind of disappointment on their face. And that's when I'll try to finish with, but you'll save somebody.
Yep.
And you need to be able to understand that you've made that impact on somebody. And that's worth, all the crap and paperwork that you go through when you get that that gratitude, or you can see it on their face or the way they interact, and you see their growth after it. 1 out of 5, you're still saving that one person.
It's great. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, look, I think don't be disheartened if you find yourself in a position where you're not enjoying it completely. I think the best thing about youth work or community work is the sector's so broad and there's so many different positions, and it's a very employable sector. If you put yourself out there and you show enthusiasm, you will find a job, and you'll eventually find a place, a little niche where you just love what you do. And I think that's what people need to focus on, that it takes time to find your place, but during that time you should always be learning, you should always be upskilling. If you're not working full time, think about going back and studying. If you feel like you want to move into different positions, there's always things to do. Just don't stay where you're at. Always think about your future.
Keep moving forward. Well said. Yeah. Beck?
I think, go Beck.
I have to go with both what Matt and Tom said, because they're 100% spot on with what they said. If I was to add a little bit of wisdom, I would say obviously it comes down to your experience and what qualification you get to get an interview. But I think when it comes to the actual interview, what's going to shine through is your attitude and your willingness to learn. And so, you want to get that interview, but in that interview, it's about your attitude, and they're going to hire you based on your attitude and your passion and the way you come across in that interview. And so I think that's really, really key. So just shine in the interview, and I think that gives you a better chance landing that job.
Great. Thanks, Beck. Jesse?
I think all people who go into youth work are obviously very caring people. They're going with the right intentions and everything. And there's a very good proportion of people who go in with their own traumas. We all come in with our own traumas. And some of the best advice I've ever been given, and which kind of has set me up for a kind of long career and what I have so far, is that you are going to be triggered, and you can be triggered quite easy by a lot of the stuff that you're going to experience and come across. So if you're not solid in who you are, and you haven't dealt with your own traumas to a level where you're going to be able to respond appropriately, then you really need to think about taking a break and stepping back and focusing on yourself a lot more. And then that leads into the self-care element, which is probably number one for any youth worker that wants to have a long career, is that you need to be very good at looking after yourself. And if that does mean, stop work for 6 months to really focus on your mental health or whatever it is, really work on those triggers, then that's what you need to do. I did it, stopped for about 6 months, or went casual and did a couple of hours a week. And it was the best thing I could have done. So really, really know yourself, because it's easily, kids cut through it like anything. You can't hide in youth work.
It creeps up on you too. People don't realise that one day you think you're fine, and then I've seen it happen to workers. You really got to know when you've had enough and put things in place to support yourself.
For sure.
Just to touch on that as well, I've said to students, and just from experience of being in the sector and working with a range of different people, I'll usually ask them why they want to do youth work, and you'll get a big response of, I had a youth worker when I was younger, or I had a troubled, childhood, and I want to make a difference, which is great. And, bringing those experiences into your career, you're going to have a bit of a better understanding, but you really need to understand that you're not that young person. So the way that you coped, or the mechanisms that helped you, aren't necessarily going to help every young person you're going to work with. So you need to be able to separate your professionalism from your personal background, and just kind of draw on it when it's required.
Yep.
You can't just focus generally on, when I was younger, this helped me, so this is automatically going to help you, because, saying that to a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old in crisis and kind of telling them how they should feel, or, how they should be responding to a certain event, you're not going to really get a positive outcome.
Yeah. It's like telling them to suck eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's always an opportunity, and there's always a time to use your own experience to help the situation as well.
Yeah.
And it's knowing that, because there's a thin line between
I always say that you can use your personal experiences as a way to understand where someone may be coming from. But at the end of the day, if someone's going through a crisis, it's their experience, it's their life. It's not about you. It's not personal to you. It's them. And I think that's the focus. It needs to be about them, not you.
Yeah, exactly. And everything that you've all said is basically the answer that I give to people as well. So it's know your why. Why are you doing this? It's not a glory job. You're not going to get high fives and pats on the back every day.
All the money.
Or money, yeah. It's not for the money. If you're doing it as your own therapy, that's not a great way of doing it either. If you're doing it because you want to save everyone, that's not going to happen. So you really need to know your why. Why am I doing this? And I always tell people, think, it's bucketing down rain, it's freezing cold, you're tucked up under your doona, you feel crook as a dog. What's going to get you out of bed? Why are you going to do it? Because if you don't have an answer for that, you're not going to last in youth work. It's hard slog every day with, those mountaintop experiences once in a blue moon. So know your why, and you'll be fine from there. Guys and girls, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's been a blast to have a chat with some former students who have been out in the world for a bit and have grappled with these questions for real. It's not theory anymore. There's been some practice behind it. So thanks so much for taking the time to come on board and share your wisdom.
Thanks.
No problem.
No worries.
No worries. Take care.
See ya.
Ciao.